and a copy of the recording will be available on the Gold Standard YouTube channel shortly after the webinar. And as Richard mentioned, you can type your questions in the Q&A box that you can see on your dashboard, and we'll try to respond to as many as we can. We also plan on having a small Q&A at the end of the webinar if time permits. If not, then you can leave your questions in the Q&A box, or just contact us directly, and we'll be happy to help you with your concerns. Okay, so this is the agenda for the webinar today. We will be covering some important core document updates and some optional requirements which were actually done by Gold Standard recently. One such important, core document update is the design change requirements. And in terms of the optional requirements, we'll go over the GHG emissions reduction and sequestration product requirements document with a special focus on Annex B, which details out the rules for transition of projects from CDM and other schemes to Gold Standard for the global goals. We'll also have a quick look at the deviation approval requirements and procedures, a small rule clarification on the water boiling test for efficiency determination. Then Richard will give a short update on accreditation, which SustainCert is seeking, and where we are in the process right now, and what changes you can expect going forward. And just wanted to do a quick shout out on the Gold Standard Voluntary Carbon Market consultation, which is ongoing. And if you still haven't provided your feedback, you can go ahead and do that as soon as possible. So starting with the first core document update, which is the design change requirements document. You might have noticed that the design change requirements were earlier existing as Annex A in the principles and requirements document, but now this document has been converted into a standalone document, and basically provides the requirements and the procedure based on which the design changes in projects will be approved. So this applies to projects which are seeking permanent changes to the project, either in the implementation or operation or during the monitoring of any certified project activity. The idea behind converting these requirements from Annex to a standalone document is to basically provide more clarity on things like what constitutes a permanent change, which changes require design change approvals, the types of changes which are allowed, what are the applicable pathways for submitting these change requests, what are the documents, and how these requests will be basically processed and approved. So to bring more clarity on these aspects, this now is a standalone document. So as I mentioned earlier, this applies to permanent changes. So this is the keyword to note here. There might be some temporary changes which are only applicable for a specific time period or for a specific period of the project implementation or operation or monitoring. Then those will be dealt separately through a deviation approval procedure, which we will go through in the coming slides. Also a quick note here to let you know and to remind you all that the request for approval of a design change should be submitted within 1 year of the start date of the proposed technology or measure. And if the design change request is not submitted within 1 year of its start date, then that design change component will not be eligible under gold standard. For any other, changes or corrections, like, changes in cover letter, project ownership, etc., you can, submit the revised or applicable documents to sustain cert. For instance, if there is any change in project ownership, you can submit a revised cover letter directly to sustain cert, and this should not be requiring any design change. Some of the documents that we would be, going through, or we would be requiring for assessing, the design change request would be, of course, the PDD or the POADD or VPADD in both track change and clean versions. We'll also need a document, an additional document, that is design change memo, to go with the updated PDD or POADD or VPADD. So this design change memo would basically summarize, what all design changes are being proposed in the project, what would be the impact of this design change, and also, reasons behind making the changes in the project activity. So all this information, will go in the design change memo. So design change memo now has a specific template. So if you are in the process of, submitting or preparing for a design change in a project, we would request you to please use the template for the design change memo, which is available on the gold standard website. In addition to the PDD and this memo, if there is any additional supporting information or documentation like EIA that you would have done in relation to the design change component, that too should be provided along with the above two documents. In case there is a VVB opinion required, that should also be submitted as part of the design change request. So I guess we have seen this word permanent quite a few times now in the last couple of slides. So let's see, what is a permanent change, and how, is a permanent change defined. So I'm just quoting, directly from the gold standard document on design change requirements. Here for the definition, so the document says that, any changes which basically alter the design of the project and is permanent in nature would be, referred to as a permanent change. So any change, with respect to, let's say, the applicability of the methodology, or any change which impacts, the monitoring plan of the project, the scale of the project, or stakeholder consultation, sustainable development impact, or any of the, safeguarding principle assessment, that would be a permanent change. However, there might be, certain small corrections which you might have to make. For instance, changing some project information, or and as I said, as I mentioned earlier, changes in the project ownership, or any parameters which basically does not impact the design of the project. All those does not need a design change approval from sustain cert. So for that change or small corrections, you can go ahead and submit us the revised documents directly. So let's see, what type of changes can happen. What type of permanent changes can happen in a project? One could be, the start date of the registered crediting period. So there could be two scenarios. The first one would be a scenario wherein the start date, has to be shifted an year earlier than the original crediting period start date, which was there in the registered PDD. This is allowed as long as the start date is not earlier than 2 years from the date of registration or the start date of the project. So as long as this criteria is met, it's fine to shift the crediting period start date 1 year earlier than the original crediting period start date. However, note in case of afforestation, reforestation, and agriculture projects, it is a maximum of 3 years prior to project design certification. The second scenario is the one in which the start date of the crediting period has to be changed after the date of design certification. So in such a case, if the change is or if the changed or the updated crediting period is up to 1 year, then at that time the project developer basically has to demonstrate that no changes have occurred in the project activity, and in such a case no justification or approval would be required. But if the change is between 1 to 2 years, that is if the gap in the new proposed crediting period start date and the original crediting period start date is between 1 to 2 years, then in such a situation the project developer has to justify that the baseline is basically still the same. There is no change in the baseline, and there are continuous actions and substantive progress that has been made by the project developer to start the project. Other changes, could be to the start date, which is more than 2 years of the crediting period, up to 4 years, and if the project is located in a non-LDC, non-LLDC, or non-SIDDC country, then the project developer has to justify that the project remains additional all through these years, along with demonstration that the original baseline, which was submitted in the registered PDD, still remains valid and there is no change in the baseline. In case there are any changes in the methodology version which takes place since the registration of the project, then that has to be done along with the emission factors. If emission factors are updated, or if the government or the host country government publishes new information on emission factors, then those have to be taken into account. In case of a land use project, no such request to change the start date of the crediting period is required to be made if the start date of the crediting period is prior to the start date is prior to the date of registration of the project. Some other permanent changes could be changes in the registered monitoring plan. So if there is any change in the monitoring plan or the registered monitoring plan of the project activity, then in that case the design change request should include a description of the nature and the nature of the non-conformance to the monitoring plan, and an alternative monitoring approach also has to be proposed by the project developer. While proposing the alternative monitoring approaches, it is important to keep in mind that it should be based on conservative assumptions and any discount factors should be used to avoid overestimation of emission reductions or any other claims. It should also be demonstrated that whatever changes are being proposed in the registered monitoring plan, they are in line with what the methodology requires. So if there are any specific requirements on data management, QA/QC procedures listed in the methodology, then those will apply and has to be taken into account. If by chance, the changes are not as per the applied methodology, then a change or a revision in the methodology is required, and methodology approval procedure should be followed in such cases. In addition to changes in crediting periods, changes in monitoring plan, there could be some changes in the actual project design also. For instance, the capacity of the project may change. There could be new components which are added to the project, or the project extends, let's say, its boundary to include other host countries or different technologies. There could be a removal of a component of the certified project activity, or there could be removal of one of the technology types. So all these changes add up to permanent changes. So these are only some of the examples. There could be more instances wherein the design of the project changes. And we would request you to refer to the design change requirements document, because it gives you more examples and more instances of what is defined as a permanent change to the project design. Similar to standalone projects, POAs can also witness changes in the design, in its design. So similar to standalone projects, there might be changes to the POA boundary to include additional host countries, or to include different technologies. There could also be revisions in the inclusion criteria, which might be required to include more activities. For instance, if a POA has one technology, that technology will have its own set of inclusion criteria. And if the POA wants to change its design to include more technologies or more different type of technologies, then the inclusion criteria for that technology has to be incorporated into the existing inclusion criteria. So all this would be termed as a permanent change to the project design. Some other examples could be, as I mentioned earlier, removal or addition of new components to the existing project design, changes in the capacity. The project capacity might change from, let's say, 5 megawatt to 10 megawatt. So all this is a permanent change to the project design. In terms of document preparation, as we saw earlier, there were 4 main documents that are required: the PDD, in both track change and clean version, the design change memo, the VVB opinion if it applies, and any supporting additional document like EIA or any additional surveys or studies that are required. So these are the 4 main documents. But in terms of the content which should go into these documents, these are the 9 key aspects which should be the focus of the request. So this would be additionality, the applicability of methodology, compliance with monitoring plan, completeness in the monitoring data, scale of the project, stakeholder consultation, sustainable development criteria, legislation, and safeguarding assessment. So these are the 9 key criteria on which the impact of the design change has to be discussed before submission to sustain cert. So these are all included in the new design change memo template. So that's why we urge you to use the design change memo template so that we can ensure that all the requisite information and these key criteria are discussed in that memo, and these are basically not missed out. So there are uh, two broad tracks through which these design change requests can be processed. The first one is a more sort of a proactive track or a prior notification track, wherein you can submit the request for design change approval before, let's say, you proceed with any request for issuance or request for performance review. So if this is the case, then a VVB role is pretty important, because the VVB is then required to assess whether the proposed changes or whatever the actual changes that have taken place comply with the relevant design change requirements, and then the VVB has to provide an opinion on that. And this request for approval can be submitted anytime before the request for issuance is submitted. The other track could be the issuance track, wherein the request for design change is submitted together with the request for performance review, in which the contracted VVB basically reviews the impact of the design change based on the design change requirements and those 9 key criteria which we saw in the earlier slide. And they assess whether the proposed changes are in compliance with the relevant requirements or not. So if there are design change requests which are submitted sorry, under the issuance track, then these can be reviewed in parallel with the ongoing performance review. However, the risk or potential implications of non-approval of the design change should be kept in mind while choosing this track. There are, situations wherein design changes are identified as part of the certification review. So as we review documents which are submitted for certification, we observe design changes or permanent design changes. Then in such a situation, we may review and make the decision during the review itself, or we might ask you to submit a design change request separately. So it depends, on the type of the change that we observe, and also the implication of the change that is being requested. If the change, let's say, is for example related to change in crediting period, then that's crediting period start date, then that might be something which we can review as part of the certification review itself. However, if the change is, let's say, more substantial or is related to a rule or a critical, significant methodological requirement, then for that we might ask for a separate design change request. So as soon as the design change approval request is received, we do a quick completeness check to make sure if all the information and documentation is in place, and based on the design change review. If you are doing a design change review, then the decision on the request will be communicated accordingly. And then if that design change request is approved, then the documentation, the updated documentation which is submitted as part of the design change request, then becomes applicable to all future all future issuances, and those updated final documents are then made publicly available. So some of the changes, that can be processed together with the issuance track are, let's say, any small corrections related to project information, changes related to monitoring plan or monitoring, processes, which does not have a material impact on the applicability of methodology. Things like, there were certain corrections that had to be made in the monitoring plan, which do not, impact the additionality or scale or SD impact. Then those can be, dealt simultaneously with the issuance of the project itself. So that was, the design change requirements document. This is just, a summary of the core document, and we have tried to focus only on the most important, requirements. But we strongly suggest you to please have a look at the entire document, and come back to us if you have any further questions on that. So moving on to the next update, which is, related to the GHG emissions reduction and sequestration product requirements. So the most important, change in this document that we are going to focus on would be the transition from CDM and other schemes to the gold standard for the global goals. And we'll also have a quick discussion on this new CDM transition request form. So gold standard has basically updated the Annex B to better support high impact projects that are at risk of discontinuation under CDM, and the objective is basically to streamline the requirements to make the transition for eligible projects much smoother, and to also ensure that if there is already work which is completed under previous standards, that's not repeated, to bring down the cost and time. And the updated document also gives more clarity on different pathways that the projects can choose to move their projects or to transition their projects to the gold standard for the global goals. So as we will go through the slides, we'll see what changes and simplifications basically have been made. But this is just a recap of, I guess, what we have already discussed in the last couple of webinars also. So all this general requirements and eligibility criteria, etc., has sort of already been released in different rule updates by gold standard over the last few months. But this is now all consolidated under Annex B of the GHG emission reductions and sequestration product requirements document. But I think we can do a quick recap on what's eligible for transition and what's not. So any project can transition if it falls under GS4GG eligible project type. Any project from other standard which has a valid registration status at the time of preliminary review for sustained cert is also eligible to transition. A project which has a crediting period start date on or after 1st January 2016 is eligible to transition. However, if the start date of the crediting period is before 1st January 2016, then in that case we would like to see more justification from the project developer on how the project has been operational in the absence of carbon revenues all these years, and and how much risk does that project faces of discontinuation without carbon revenues. Important point to notice that transition projects can claim emission reductions of a given vintage only once. So if there are any CDM projects which are transitioning, those projects can claim emission reductions either under CDM or either under gold standard for that one given vintage. And transition projects have to provide more gold standard specific information which is not covered in the documentation of other standards in the form of a transition request form. So transition request form is basically a template, a new template which has been released by gold standard to help you submit a transition request in a simple and a standardized way. So transition template is nothing but a checklist, and this checklist should help you identify any gaps in the requirements, and also specifies the additional gold standard specific information that you need to provide for the preliminary review. So this should allow you to demonstrate potential compliance with the transition requirements without the need to redesign the project documentation. So if you, let's say, are using a transition request form, then you don't necessarily have to redo the PDD. And for sustain cert, I guess this enables us a quick and easy way to review all the information, which reduces time and cost to help the transition of projects in a much more smoother manner. We would highly recommend you to download the transition request form. So the transition request form is available for standalone projects, for POAs, and also for CPAs on the Gold Standard website. Other important thing and a lot of feedback that we received from project developers was on the deregistration from other standards. So what Gold Standard has done is they have sort of provided a flexibility in terms of deregistration. So any CDM project which is already, let's say, have started the process for transition and is in the process of registration with GS4GG is no longer required to deregister from CDM. However, this is not applicable to afforestation, reforestation projects. So eligible AR projects from CDM are still required to deregister from CDM in order to transition to GS4GG. However, all non-CDM projects, are required to deregister and confirm that the project status is not, does not have a valid registration, and they have to submit evidence to the VBB before the project can be registered under Gold Standard for the global goals. So projects, for instance, who want to transition from DCS to GS, so they have to provide evidence of deregistration to the Gold Standard. In terms of the financial additionality and ongoing financial needs, again, CDM GI projects are not required to carry out additional additionality assessments. However, projects which are registered with other standards, non-CDM standards, they would still be required to undergo additionality reassessment to basically re-establish the validity of all the assumptions which were applied at the time of additionality demonstration with the earlier standard. So again, an example could be a VCS project transitioning to GS4GG might have to redo the additionality assessment. If if these projects, are transitioned and become gold standard for global goal projects, then these projects, have to demonstrate ongoing financial need at the time of the renewal of their crediting period under GS for GG. So for transition of CDM projects, additionality assessment is not required. But once these CDM transitioned projects undergo renewal under GS for GG, then they have to demonstrate ongoing financial need. In terms of methodology and tool version, also there is, a flexibility provided by Gold Standard in the sense that, registered projects, POAs, CPAs can basically use the same version of the methodology which they had used at the time of registration with the other standard during transition. However, whenever these, existing registered projects, POAs or CPAs undergo renewal under Gold Standard for the global goals, then at that time they have to update to the most recent version of methodology which is available at that time. However, in case there are any new activities for POAs, which are submitted after the transition to GS for GG, then in those cases, the latest version of the MEP, has to be applied for those new VPA CPA inclusions. But for any existing registered project POA CPAs, they can transition with the same version of the methodology. So that's, one benefit. A few other, things to keep in mind. Projects basically should not change the scale at the time of transition. They should basically maintain the same project scale with under which they were registered in CDM or any other standard. In terms of the crediting period, the transition, projects should issue or claim ERs for a maximum crediting period which is allowed as per the GS for GG requirements. For instance, a POA which is transitioning should not exceed, let's say 20 years, or the crediting period of first CPA, plus 5 years, whichever is greater. So it should not, in a sense, cross the maximum limit which is, allowed under GS for GG. For retroactive, issuance, you all know that Gold Standard allows a retroactive issuance of a maximum of 2 years. But the milestone from which, these 2 years were counted was earlier design, certification date or the date of registration. But now for transition projects, the retroactive period, starts 2 years back from the date of submission for preliminary review and not the date of registration. So this is another advantage. For AR projects, the maximum retroactive period which is allowed is 3 years instead of 2 years in energy and waste. The crediting cycle, also has to follow the GS for GG crediting cycle for all transition projects. That is, 5 years. So let's say we have a transition project which starts its crediting period from 1st Jan 2019. Then that project has to renew its crediting period after 5 years, which is 1st Jan 2024. Irrespective of whenever that project has transitioned to Gold Standard for the global goals. And whenever this crediting period renewal happens, then that project or POA or CPA has to make use of the most updated version of the methodology or any other applicable tools at that time. However, if you want, you always have the option to renew the crediting period early as well to follow the GS/GG certification cycle. But the two main benefits are that the crediting period, the retroactive period now starts from 2 years prior to the date of submission for preliminary review. So that's one benefit, and the other benefit is that transition can be done based on the existing version of the methodology with which the project was registered under CDM. So I am, now going to take you through some of the options through which the transition can take place. And you can find this information in the transition, request form. So basically, there are three options through, which the project developers can choose to transition their projects. The first option, is the normal certification pathway, wherein, there is a preliminary review done by Sustain Cert, a validation done by VVB, and then design review by Sustain Cert, verification by VVB, and then there is a performance review by Sustain Cert. So this follows, the normal certification cycle. That is, there is a 4-week, preliminary review, then there is a 4-week of design review period, and then there is a 3-week, performance review period. So this is, the normal certification pathway, which also applies to the projects, which are not transitioning. However, option 2, gives you the possibility to have a combined preliminary review plus, a validation and a design review, meaning that, you can combine the preliminary review with the validation and the design review. In this case, the performance review again is of 3 weeks, which is, followed by verification by VVB. So the advantage is that, since the preliminary review and the design review is sort of combined, so we do only one review, after which the project is, let's say, registered, and then the VVB does the verification, and then Sustain Cert carries out the performance review to issue, any credits. So instead of 3 reviews, there are only 2 reviews. That is a combined preliminary review and design review, and then a performance review. This might, involve some additional fees, and the fee structure might differ for this option. So please, contact Sustain Cert directly in case you want to use option 2 for transitioning any of your seeding projects. The option 3 is, a combined validation verification by DOE, and then a combined, let's say, design and performance review by Sustain Cert. So this would, still require a preliminary review, but immediately, after preliminary review, if the validation and verification reports are ready, then Sustain Cert can do a combined design review and a performance review. So this, combined design and performance review will be of 6 weeks. So these are, some of the options and a very high level summary of how the process looks like. But we would, encourage you to please go through the transition request form in more detail to find out, all the requirements. Also, just a quick recap on how CRs can be converted to VERs. So let's say, a project has gone through all the review stages and has issued with and is now has completed the performance certification. Then the project, basically transfers the issued CERs to the gold standard Swiss CDM registry account. The gold standard then immediately retires those transferred CERs and issues an equivalent number of GSVERs on the gold standard impact registry after the relevant fee has been paid. If you have any specific or more detailed questions on the process for conversion of emission reductions from other standards, that is non-CDM cases, to gold standard BERs, then feel free to reach out to us directly. All right. So let's have a quick look at the deviation approval procedures. This was released by Gold Standard in January this year, and I think we just discussed on if the changes are temporary, then they should follow the deviation approval process. So this is the document which would be applicable in such cases. So any temporary change to a certified project, which can include any changes in registered monitoring plan or any applied methodologies, which are temporary in nature and are not expected to occur beyond a specific time period or beyond a given monitoring period, then that would be defined as a deviation. So any change which happens with respect to principles and requirements document or activity requirements or product or context requirements, so if anything deviates from these key principle key code documents, then that would be termed as a deviation. If there is a deviation which the project developer observes or notices proactively, then in such cases a deviation request has to be submitted. When we say deviation request, then that request should include a PDD or a POADD in both track change and clean versions. If there is a monitoring report applicable, then that also should be submitted along with the deviation request. A deviation request form, again a template which is available on the Gold Standard website, should be filled in, which summarizes all the temporary changes and the impact that these changes have on the project. Any supporting documents like EIA, or if there are any changes to licenses to the project, etc., should all be submitted together with the deviation request. In addition to these documents, it will be great if a discussion on the nature and the scope of temporary changes and the duration of the non-conforming monitoring period is also discussed in these documents. If you want to propose any alternative monitoring approaches, then those also should be included as discussion in these documents, and any discount factors or conservative assumptions that are being applied should be clearly discussed in these documents. And I guess this is what we have been following for design change cases also. So in deviation cases also, if there are alternative approaches which are being let's say proposed, then the most conservative values should be applied, and project developers are also requested to clarify in the documents as to when the changes started, and what is the duration of this temporary change, and when the project will sort of revert to its original design in the in the document. So all this information should be included. So the deviation request forms along with the updated documents should be submitted to SustainCert. Now how we process these deviation request, I guess depends on when these deviations are spotted, or when these deviations are submitted, or or when these are basically caught um, in the process. So depending on when these deviation requests are submitted, or when these deviation requests are communicated, and what type of deviation requests are, that defines how these requests will be processed. But let's say, for the sake of simplicity, the project developers foresee some changes, or foresee a temporary change which is happening in the monitoring plan, for example, before the review with SustainCert starts. Then in those cases, they are welcome to go ahead and submit the deviation requests proactively. If there is a precedent that exists, that is, TAC has the gold standard TAC has previously approved a similar deviation, then we can decide on the deviation request in line with the previous decisions. If there is no precedent existing for that type of a request, then that will be presented to the TAC for their approval. For project specific deviations, the approval decision will again depend on the type of deviation and the impact of the deviation, and will basically define the expectations as to how the project should proceed, and maybe revert to its original plan. And all these decisions will be communicated to project developer, and or if VVB is also involved, in the form of deviation forms itself. There could be cases when these deviations, or any changes, temporary changes, are spotted as part of the review. If that is the case, then those will be dealt as part of the review itself. But if the changes are too significant or too critical, and are too big with respect to a rule or a specific methodological requirement, then SustainCert may ask project developers to submit a deviation request form separately. Again, but if there are any precedents which exist, then decisions will be taken accordingly by SustainCert as part of the review itself. So whenever a decision is taken by GS TAC, it sort of constitutes a precedent. That is, the approved deviation should also be applicable for other projects. So what has Gold Standard started doing is that they have started publishing these deviation requests on the Gold Standard website. And if there are any precedents which are set, then they are also published as rule updates or clarifications going forward. So I don't know if you have noticed, but you can find a list of all the approved deviations on the Gold Standard website. So if you go to standards section, there is a separate tab called deviations, and you can find a list on all the deviations that have been recently approved by the Gold Standard. You can also download the specific deviation request form and go through the details if you want to. Okay, so I guess we are a bit pressing on time, so we'll quickly go over this rule clarification on water boiling test. So you all must be aware that the water boiling test consists of 3 phases, cold start, hot start, and simmer phase. So cold start, high start are hot start, sorry, are basically the high power phases. So the clarification says that thermal efficiency, should be the average of the cold start and the hot start phase only. So the results from the simmer phase should not be included while calculating the thermal efficiency. So this was the quick rule clarification. I guess these were all the important updates that we wanted to share with you. We also have one small update on the status of sustained cert accreditation. And for this, I'll hand over the floor to my colleague, Richard. So Richard, over to you.
Hi, Neha. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, yeah, 2 minutes remaining. Hopefully I can just provide a short update. So I think this may become a regular communication feature from Sustain Cert. We're probably going to use as many different media as possible just to make sure that the project development community is aware of our progress and potential changes. So if you recall, there was a publication in February announcing that Sustain Cert will be applying for accreditation. This is to assist Gold Standard meet their requirements for full ISEAL membership, and also just to maybe sharpen up our procedures with a bit of independent oversight. And so the purpose of this update really is just to prepare you for some changes in the way that we deliver internal validation and verification. We're on a fairly ambitious timeline. It takes a long time to get accredited, but we're trying to do it as quickly as possible. So all of this is to say, perhaps in the next 2 months, you're going to see some changes in the way that we do things. We're aligning with ISO requirements, so 14065 for those of you who are interested. And there's 4 stages of an audit process. Of which we don't really follow in our internal procedures at the moment, so there is a bit of alignment. So the first of these stages is pre-engagement. So essentially what you will begin to see over the coming months is you will see some new forms that will confirm that we are equipped to do the assignment and that we have a contractual agreement for the service that we're providing. The second of which is the approach. One of ISO requirements is that we need to communicate who is working on the assignment and what it is that we're going to do in our audit. So that will be a change that you're going to see. I think both of these things are positive for project developers, because you get a bit more transparency in what we're doing. And then the third step is the actual audit itself and the reporting of. And so what we need to do there is follow the approach that we have communicated to you. And the major change that you will see is that our internal validation and verification reports will change. They're probably going to look much more like VVB reports. So that's something to look out for as well. And a fourth and final step in an ISO compliant audit is that there is an independent check that all of the previous stages have been carried out, and this check is by someone who's not part of the team who's involved in the original audit. So I think, bearing in mind we're at the sort of end of today's session, we'll just leave it there. Just wanted to make sure that people were kept up to date with these changes, and as always, we're available in case of any questions. Happy to answer them now, and cover any questions as we go through this exciting phase in our development. So Neha, I guess we can skip the next slide and perhaps pause for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. A quick reminder to let you all know that Gold Standard consultation on voluntary carbon market is still ongoing. In case you would like to provide your inputs or feedback, you can do so until 15th of April. So Gold Standard is inviting inputs on 2 documents. One is on how to, align the Gold Standard projects and requirements in line with, the Paris Agreement. And also the second document, I believe, is on double counting in the voluntary carbon market going forward. So if you have any inputs or if you would like to, provide your feedback, then you can follow this link and send your inputs to Gold Standard. Right. So I think this brings us to the end of the slides. I don't know, maybe we can do like a 5-minute Q&A and take the questions which you already have in the chat box. Okay, so maybe I can take the question from Srinivasan Krishnan. So his question is, hi, our project monitoring period approved by Gold Standard is for 5 years. But due to COVID-19 interim measures, VVB can verify only up to 2 years of the monitoring period by remote verification process. As a project developer from Taiwan, things get complicated to find 2 more VVBs for the remaining 3 years for remote verification purpose. So we would like to check if we can apply for the deviation process. So my answer would be yes, you can, submit a deviation request to Gold Standard. But since this is, a very project specific case and we might not have any precedent on this yet, so this request, will be submitted to the Gold Standard Technical Advisory Committee for their approval. Is there anything, Richard, that you would like to add from your side on this?
No, Neha. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting situation.
Yeah. Right. So yes, Srinivasan, you can go ahead and submit a deviation request form to Gold Standard. All right. Another question on the crediting cycle from Prem Kumar. His question is that he's still not clear about the crediting period of the Gold Standard CER project activities or Gold Standard POAs or CPAs. So he wants to clarify when the crediting period of let's say any CPA or project activity is renewed under Gold Standard for the global goals, then what should be the crediting cycle? Should it be 5 years or should that be 7 years? Richard, are you happy to take this question?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it because it's again an interesting question.
Yeah.
So the answer, Prem, when Gold Standard released GS4GG, the principle was for GSCR projects, the renewal cycle would mirror the host standard. And so taking that logic, if CDM still exists, Gold Standard would expect that you follow that same cycle. However, there is a slight complication in what we've seen today, in that any project that transitions to issue Gold Standard VERs comes across to the 5-year cycle. So to some extent, it depends what your situation is, but those are the 2 possible outcomes. So I hope that adds a bit of clarity. I mean, and I think what we can do is offer a sort of written response to this question as well, and just share it for everyone's benefit as well.
Right. There is another, good question on transition from Nikunj. So his question is, in case of, transition projects from GSCER to VER, and if there is, let's say no need to deregister the project from CDM, does it mean that only, CER with CDM, or, GSVER can be claimed? So Nikunj, if I understand your question correctly, so if there is, no need to deregister the project from CDM, still, for a given vintage, the project can claim, either, under CDM or under gold standard for the global goals. So for one given vintage, you cannot have both, CER or VER. But what you can do is you can always convert CERs into VERs if you want to for a given vintage or for a given period, and that can be done if you complete the certification cycle with GS and then transfer the issued CERs to the gold standard CDM registry account, and if these are received successfully, then gold standard retires these credits and issue an equivalent amount of VERs on the gold standard impact registry. So I guess this is what you were asking, and hope it clarifies your question. All right, I think we have quite a few other questions which unfortunately will not be able to take in the webinar, but we have noted down all these questions, and we'll get back to you on these questions as soon as possible after the webinar. All right, so thank you once again for joining us on the webinar. And the recording will be posted on the Gold Standard YouTube channel shortly. And if you have sent your questions, you will receive a response from our side on these also as soon as possible. So thanks again, and we'll speak soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.